The difference between kindness and weakness: you've been told your whole life to be kind, be polite, be agreeable, don't make waves. But somewhere along the way, that message got twisted. You started believing that being kind meant being quiet, that being polite meant saying yes, even when everything inside you screamed no, and that being agreeable meant letting people walk right over you just to keep the peace. That's not kindness. That's exhaustion disguised as virtue. Let me tell you something: kindness and weakness are not the same thing. Kindness is strength under control. Weakness is strength you never learned how to use. When you're kind, you act from choice. When you're weak, you react from fear. There's a massive difference between the two, and if you don't see it, people will teach you to shrink. They'll train you to serve their comfort, not your peace. Kindness says, I respect you. Weakness whispers, please don't leave me. Kindness has a boundary. Weakness has a wound. And too many women today are bleeding behind smiles, calling it compassion. You hold everything together, you listen to everyone's problems, you show up even when you have nothing left, and deep down, you're hoping someone will finally notice how much you're giving. But they won't. Because when you give without limit, people stop seeing it as kindness. They start seeing it as your job. You can be kind and still say no. You can be kind and still walk away. You can be kind and still not explain yourself to everyone who disagrees with your choices. That's what real strength looks like. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's calm. Kindness doesn't mean you allow disrespect and call it grace. It means you see the truth, you understand it, and you still choose integrity over reaction. Here's where most people get it wrong. They think kindness is about making everyone comfortable. It's not. It's about doing what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. True kindness has boundaries because love without limits turns into resentment. You can't keep pouring from a cup that's cracked. And if you never stop to refill it, don't be surprised when you start to feel empty. Think about how many times you've said yes just to avoid disappointing someone. How many times you've smiled while your heart was screaming. How many times you've apologized for something that wasn't your fault, just to make things smoother. That's not strength, that's survival. And survival mode isn't living, it's coping. You're not meant to exist just to keep everyone else happy. Kindness without clarity becomes manipulation. People will use it against you. But kindness with clarity becomes power. It's the kind of power that doesn't need to raise its voice. It just stands firm. And when you start practicing that kind of kindness, you stop attracting people who feed on your softness. You start attracting people who respect your strength. When you finally understand that saying no doesn't make you rude, it makes you real. You'll start to feel your energy shift. You'll walk differently. You'll speak differently. And people will notice. Not because you become mean, but because you finally stop being afraid of what kindness really means. Kindness is not the absence of strength, it's the direction of it. It's knowing when to open your heart and when to protect it. It's the ability to forgive without forgetting the lesson. It's showing compassion without becoming someone's emotional doormat. That balance, that's where your peace lives, that's where your confidence grows. Because at the end of the day, the world doesn't need more soft women who say yes to everything. The world needs women who can be gentle without being naïve, who can be loving without losing themselves, who can be kind without being silent. That's not weakness, that's emotional intelligence at its highest level. And once you learn the difference, you stop living for approval and start living from power. Emotional boundaries are self-respect. Every time you let someone drain you, interrupt your peace, or make you feel small, you're teaching them how to treat you. And most of the time, it's not because they're cruel, it's because you haven't shown them where the line is. Emotional boundaries are not about pushing people away, they're about letting the right ones close enough to care while protecting your own stability. It's not selfishness, it's self-respect. You see, most women who struggle with boundaries aren't weak, they're just exhausted from giving too much. You were taught that love means sacrifice, that being a good person means being available, understanding, patient, forgiving. But what nobody told you is that when you give constantly without balance, you teach others that your energy is limitless, and it's not. That's why you feel burnt out, that's why you feel unappreciated. Because you've turned your compassion into a full-time job with no paycheck, no break, and no appreciation. Emotional boundaries are not walls, they're doors with locks, and you hold the key. You decide who gets access and how much. It's not about being distant, it's about being deliberate. You can love someone deeply and still say, that behavior isn't acceptable. You can care about someone and still say, I need space. You can show empathy without absorbing their pain as your own. That's not cruelty, that's maturity. Too many people confuse self-sacrifice with love. But when you constantly fix other people's messes, you're not loving them. You're rescuing them from lessons they need to learn. You end up carrying emotions that were never yours to begin with, and the weight of other people's chaos will crush your peace if you keep letting it in. That's why Jefferson Fisher teaches that emotional boundaries are a form of communication, not punishment. They tell people, this is how to love me correctly. Think about it. When someone crosses your line and you stay quiet, you're training them that it's okay. When you forgive without accountability, you teach them that apologies don't need change. When you show up for everyone but yourself, you show the world that your time is negotiable. But the moment you start saying, I can't talk right now, or I don't deserve to be spoken to like that, or no, I won't be the one fixing this again, everything shifts. You reclaim control of your emotional space. The hardest part is the guilt that comes after setting boundaries. That voice that says, you're being mean, you're being dramatic, or they'll think you don't care. That voice isn't truth, it's conditioning. It's the part of you that was trained to please everyone just to avoid rejection. But self-respect will always feel uncomfortable at first because you've spent so long betraying yourself just to belong. And the truth is, the right people will never be offended by your boundaries. The ones who benefit from your lack of them. They will. The people who love you for your peace will support your need to protect it. But the people who love you for your compliance will call you difficult. The moment you stop giving endlessly, let them. Because when you build emotional boundaries, you stop negotiating your worth with people who only valued your availability. Having emotional boundaries means you finally understand that not every argument needs your voice, not every story needs your sympathy, and not every problem requires your energy. You become more selective with where you invest your emotions because you realize that peace is more valuable than proving a point. You start to respond instead of react. You learn that silence can be power and walking away can be wisdom. And maybe for the first time in your life, you start feeling free. Because the moment you draw that invisible line and honor it, not through anger, but through calm confidence, you stop chasing validation, you start choosing yourself. And when that happens, you no longer need people to respect you to feel worthy. You respect yourself enough to enforce the boundaries that keep your peace intact. Softness without strength breeds resentment. There's a quiet kind of pain that builds inside a woman who keeps giving but never getting anything back. It's the kind of pain that doesn't scream, it simmers, it hides behind smiles, behind I'm fine, behind all the times you've said, it's okay, don't worry about it, when deep down it wasn't okay at all. That pain is resentment, and it grows every time you choose softness without strength. See, being soft isn't the problem. Softness is beautiful. It's empathy, compassion, gentleness. It's the warmth that heals the world. But when softness isn't backed by strength, it becomes self-destruction in disguise. Because when you let people take and take without limits, when you silence your needs just to keep the peace, you slowly start to disappear in the name of being nice. You convince yourself you're doing the right thing, but inside something starts breaking. You start resenting the people you've been protecting. You start feeling bitterness toward the very ones you've been overextending for. And then you start resenting yourself for not speaking up, for not walking away, for not demanding the respect you know you deserve. That's what happens when your softness isn't supported by boundaries. It turns into quiet anger that you carry in your chest every single day. There comes a moment when you realize that people aren't draining you because they're powerful. They're draining you because you've given them permission. You've mistaken constant forgiveness for strength, when in truth, it's avoidance. You tell yourself, I'm being the bigger person. But sometimes being the bigger person means finally saying, enough. Softness should never mean you have to lower yourself to be loved. It should never mean tolerating behavior that breaks your peace. Real strength is what allows your softness to exist without being taken advantage of. It's what gives your heart the courage to stay open without being crushed. Because a strong woman doesn't lose her gentleness, she just learns where to place it. Think about how many times you've apologized just to stop an argument even when you weren't wrong. How many times you've said, it's fine, when it wasn't. How many times you've told yourself they didn't mean it just to avoid confrontation. Every time you do that, you're training yourself to settle. You're teaching your heart that peace only exists when you're silent. But peace doesn't come from silence, it comes from honesty. Softness without strength creates resentment because it keeps you in relationships, jobs, and situations that drain you. You start giving more than you can afford, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and you expect others to notice your effort, but they rarely do. Because when you make yourself endlessly available, people assume your energy is free. They stop seeing your presence as a gift and start treating it like a guarantee. And then one day you wake up tired, not physically, but emotionally. You're tired of saying yes, tired of pretending, tired of being the one who always cares more. You start realizing that your softness, the very thing that made you beautiful, has been turned against you. Not because people are evil, but because you never learned how to pair it with strength. Strength doesn't mean hardening your heart, it means protecting it. It means saying, I love you, but I won't lose myself for you. It means knowing that your emotions are valid, that your boundaries are necessary, and that your voice deserves to be heard even when it shakes. It means understanding that softness is not weakness, but it becomes weakness when it's afraid of confrontation. You can be gentle and still firm. You can be kind and still assertive. You can be loving and still say, no more. That's the balance that keeps your heart free from resentment. Because when you stop betraying yourself to make others comfortable, when you stop dimming your strength to stay likable, your softness becomes powerful again, becomes a choice, not a condition. That's when your presence changes. You stop chasing peace and you start embodying it. You stop trying to be the woman who never upsets anyone, and you start being the woman who can handle herself, calm, clear, and confident. And suddenly, the people who once took advantage of your kindness begin to see something different in you, something unshakable. Because your softness is now anchored in strength, not fear. Speak like you mean it, communication that commands respect. There's a power in your voice that you've forgotten you have, somewhere between being told to stay polite, to not sound angry, to not make things awkward. You learn to shrink your tone just to make other people feel comfortable. You learn to soften your truth so it wouldn't sound too harsh. But here's the truth. The way you speak teaches people how to treat you. And if you don't speak like you mean it, people won't take you seriously. Communication that commands respect isn't about volume. It's not about yelling, proving, or dominating. It's about being grounded. It's about speaking with clarity and calm conviction. The most powerful voices in the room are never the loudest. They're the ones that carry confidence in their silence, certainty in their tone, and truth in their words. Because when you truly mean what you say, people can feel it. Think about it. How many times have you said, "It's fine," when it wasn't fine? How many times have you said, "I don't mind," when you actually did? That's how you slowly teach the world that your feelings are negotiable. Every time you water down your truth, every time you laugh off disrespect, every time you say, whatever, instead of, that's not okay, you trade your peace for politeness. And people start believing that you'll accept less because you never say otherwise. Speaking like you mean it doesn't require aggression, it requires alignment. Your tone, your words, your body language, they all have to match. When you say no, it should sound like a decision, not a question. When you express what bothers you, it should come from calm confidence, not from the need to be understood. Because when your communication is clear, you don't have to repeat yourself. You don't have to over-explain. You don't have to prove your point through emotion. Most women don't lack strength in what they say. They lack belief in their right to say it. You've been told that being assertive is rude, that setting boundaries makes you cold, that speaking up makes you difficult. But assertiveness isn't aggression, it's self-respect in verbal form. It's the ability to express yourself honestly without guilt. You don't need to apologize for having a voice. You just need to learn how to use it with intention. Jefferson Fisher often says communication is leadership, and he's right. When you speak clearly, you lead the energy in the room. When you mumble, hesitate, or over-apologize, you give your power away. Confidence doesn't come from knowing everything, it comes from standing firm in what you know. You can speak slowly, calmly, and still command attention, because authority isn't about force, it's about presence. You have to stop using filler words that make your message smaller. Words like maybe, I guess, if that's okay, I'm sorry, but dilute your authority. Every time you use them, you unconsciously lower your position in the conversation. Replace them with clarity. Say, I prefer this. Say, that doesn't work for me. Say, I've decided. The more certain you sound, the more people respect your boundaries, not because you're louder, but because you're consistent. The way you carry your voice reflects how you carry yourself. When you speak from anxiety, your tone trembles. When you speak from confidence, your tone settles. That's why the most impactful speakers don't rush their words, they pause. They breathe. They let silence do the heavy lifting. Because silence, when used with confidence, is more commanding than shouting ever could be. And let's talk about something else, emotional control. Because communication that commands respect isn't just about what you say, it's about what you don't say. When you stop reacting to every trigger, when you stop defending every decision, when you let your calm become your power, you start to shift how people see you. You become someone who can't be easily provoked. Someone who leads conversations instead of being pulled into them. The moment you stop trying to convince others to respect you and start communicating like someone who already respects herself, everything changes. You stop needing to prove your worth through explanation. You stop needing to justify your boundaries with a backstory. You start to realize that your voice doesn't need to be sweet to be strong, and it doesn't need to be loud to be heard. It just needs to be honest, calm, and sure. Because when you speak like you mean it, you stop being the echo in other people's conversations, and you become the voice that defines your own. Self-validation. Stop waiting for permission. You've been waiting for someone to tell you you're doing enough, that you're good enough, that you're worthy of being seen, heard, loved, appreciated. But here's the truth that most people never say out loud. No one is coming to give you that permission. You can spend your entire life chasing approval from others, and it will never fill the space that only your own validation can. Because the moment your worth depends on someone else's opinion, you've handed them control over your peace. Self-validation is not arrogance, it's emotional freedom. It's the moment you stop measuring yourself through someone else's reaction. It's when you stop needing applause to know you're valuable. It's when you finally look at yourself and say, I'm proud of me, without waiting for anyone else to agree. Most women don't realize how much of their identity is built around being accepted, being liked, being chosen, being told they're enough. But every time you seek that approval, you're putting your confidence on lie-away, hoping someone else will come and cash it out for you. You've been conditioned to believe that humility means downplaying yourself. You've been told not to brag, not to show off, not to act too confident. So you shrink your wins, soften your opinions, and lower your voice just to stay likable. But true humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself honestly. It's being able to say, yes, I worked hard for this. Yes, I deserve this, without guilt or apology. That's not pride, that's ownership. When you constantly chase validation, you start to shape shift. You become whoever people need you to be in that moment. Around some people, you act strong. Around others, you play small. You start reading faces, adjusting your tone, editing your truth. But in the process, you lose yourself. Because every time you look outward for approval, you silence the voice inside that already knows your worth. And that inner silence, that's where insecurity grows. The problem with external validation is that it's temporary. You might feel good when someone praises you, but the feeling fades. And then you need more compliments, more recognition, more reassurance. It becomes an emotional addiction. The same people who lift you up today can tear you down tomorrow, and if your self-worth depends on them, your confidence will rise and fall with their moods. That's why Jefferson Fisher reminds us that emotional maturity begins when you stop outsourcing your self-esteem. Self-validation is not about rejecting feedback, it's about filtering it. It's about knowing that other people's opinions can inform you, but they can't define you. You can listen, learn, grow. But you don't need to beg for approval to exist. You can take up space without asking if it's okay. You can walk into a room without wondering if you belong there. You can speak your truth without softening it for someone else's comfort. Because confidence isn't the absence of doubt. It's the decision to move forward even when doubt is whispering in your ear. When you stop waiting for permission, something shifts inside you. You start saying no without guilt. You start saying yes without hesitation. You stop asking, do you think this is okay? And start saying, this is what I've decided. You begin to realize that the only validation that truly matters is your own reflection looking back at you saying, I'm proud of how far I've come, because real growth doesn't need an audience, it just needs commitment. And yes, it's uncomfortable at first. When you start validating yourself, you'll lose the comfort of being constantly approved. You'll stop hearing as many, good job, or I'm proud of you, because you won't need them anymore. But that silence, that space where you no longer rely on applause, that's where your confidence gets louder. That's where you begin to trust your instincts, honor your boundaries, and make choices that align with your peace instead of your popularity. Self-validation is choosing to stand tall even when nobody claps. It's refusing to question your worth just because someone else doesn't see it. It's waking up every morning knowing that you don't need permission to live, to lead, to speak, to exist fully. Because the moment you start giving yourself the approval you've been waiting for, the world has no choice but to start seeing you differently. You stop performing and start being. You stop chasing validation and start living from conviction. The power of boundaries that don't need explanation. There's something incredibly powerful about a person who can say no and not flinch. Someone who can say, I'm not available, and stop right there. No apology, no excuse, no explanation. That kind of clarity makes people uncomfortable, not because it's wrong, but because it's rare. Most people are so used to justifying their decisions that silence feels unnatural. But the truth is, you don't need to explain your boundaries to anyone who respects them. Boundaries that come with explanations invite argument. Boundaries that come with conviction end the conversation before it starts. You've been conditioned to believe that saying no is rude, that protecting your time means you're selfish, that taking care of yourself somehow means you're abandoning others. So every time you try to draw a line, you soften it, you over-explain. You say things like, I'm sorry, I just have a lot going on, or I hope you understand. I really wish I could. You try to make everyone feel okay with your decision because deep down, you're afraid of being misunderstood. But here's the thing, your peace doesn't need to be understood to be respected. Boundaries are not about others, they're about you. They're not punishments, they're protection. They don't push people away, they filter who belongs close to you. When you have to constantly explain your boundaries, it's usually because the person you're talking to benefits from you not having any. The ones who truly respect you won't demand reasons. They'll listen, nod, and adjust, because respect doesn't argue with clarity. Think about it. Every time you over-explain, you open a door negotiation. You say, "I can't come because I'm tired," and they respond, "It'll be quick, don't worry." You say, "I can't lend you money this time," and they say, "Just this once, please." And then suddenly you're back in the same cycle, doing things you didn't want to do, feeling drained, frustrated, and resentful. You didn't break your boundary because they talked you into it. You broke it because you felt guilty for having one. Boundaries are not emotional walls, they're doors with locks. And you have every right to decide who gets access to your energy. You don't have to justify why you don't pick up certain calls. You don't have to explain why you walked away from a friendship that no longer felt healthy. You don't have to prove why you value solitude or why you're not as available as you used to be. Growth changes what you allow, and that's not arrogance. That's evolution. The beauty of boundaries that don't need explanation is that they come from a place of calm, not anger. You're not setting them to control others, you're setting them to protect yourself. You're not trying to convince anyone to agree with you, you're simply standing firm in what you know feels right. And when you reach that level of emotional maturity, your silence becomes your statement, your peace becomes your proof. You don't announce that you've changed, your energy makes it clear. At first, it feels uncomfortable. The guilt creeps in. You'll question if you were too harsh, too distant, too cold. But that guilt is not truth. It's conditioning. It's the residue of years spent over-giving, over-explaining, over-apologizing. You've been taught to believe that love equals sacrifice, that understanding means always saying yes, that caring requires constant availability. But love without boundaries isn't love, it's self-abandonment. People will test your boundaries not because they don't hear you, but because they want to see if you mean it. That's why consistency matters more than explanation. You can say no kindly once, but if you give in after pressure, you've taught them that your no means maybe. But when your boundaries stay steady, without emotion, without debate, people start to understand you differently. They may not like it, but they'll respect it. Boundaries without explanation are built from inner peace, not pride. You're not proving a point. You're preserving your balance. You're saying, this is where I end and where you begin. You're reminding yourself that your time, energy, and emotions are not community property. And the more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. You stop feeling guilty for resting. You stop feeling rude for declining. You stop feeling selfish for taking care of yourself first. The truth is, silence after setting a boundary is powerful. It's not passive, it's peaceful. It tells the world that you've stopped performing for acceptance. You're no longer trying to please your way into being respected. You've learned that explanation is not a requirement for permission. And in that quiet confidence, something changes. People start listening differently, treating you differently, and seeing you differently because your boundaries no longer need words to be understood. Stop being a soft woman. You've heard every truth today about strength, boundaries, respect, confidence, and the power of choosing yourself without apology. This isn't about becoming hard or heartless. It's about becoming whole. For too long, you've been told that softness is the only way to be loved, that silence keeps the peace, and that self-sacrifice is the measure of a good woman. But that story ends now, because being soft in the wrong places breaks you. It drains your worth, it quiets your voice, and it makes you believe that love must always cost you your peace. But real power, real feminine strength, is knowing when to be gentle and when to stand firm. It's knowing that kindness without boundaries becomes weakness, and that peace without self-respect becomes submission. Every time you speak up, every time you say no, every time you walk away from something that doesn't value you, you reclaim a piece of yourself that softness made you lose. The goal is not to stop caring, it's to stop caring more about others' comfort than your own growth. You were not created to be endlessly available. You were not meant to be everyone's healer, fixer, an emotional cushion. You were meant to lead your own life with strength, clarity, and grace. So stop apologizing for your power. Stop explaining your worth. Stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. The world doesn't need softer women. It needs women who know the value of their softness. Women who can be gentle but not gullible, kind but not controlled, loving but never lost in the process. When you stop being a soft woman in the ways that cost you your peace, you become something unshakable, calm but fierce, quiet but respected, warm but untouchable. That's the balance of strength and softness that no one can manipulate. That's the woman you were always meant to be.